This gift of tongues is the gift of men who, wrapped in ecstasy and no longer quite masters of their own reason and conscience, pour forth their glowing spiritual emotions in strange utterances, rugged, dark, disconnected, and quite unfitted to instruct or influence the minds of others. Now, look, here's a semicolon, there's a colon, right? Here are the verses that this particular interpretation of tongues, this is the context of this type of tongues. Acts chapter 10, verse 46, this is Cornelius and his family. Acts chapter 19, this is when Paul found the disciples who had not received the baptism of tongues. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 30, this is where he asked, do all speak with tongues? Do all speak wrapped in ecstasy, no longer quite masters of their own reason and consciousness, pouring forth their glowing emotions in strange utterances, rugged, dark, disconnected, quite unfitted to instruct or influence the minds of others? 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1, where he says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, this is the kind of tongue. And there we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 2, 4 through 6, 13, 18, 23, 27, and 39. This is the definition of this tongue in its context, which is different from the known languages that were spoken in Acts chapter 2. And we'll go into that deeper in a little bit. And so, no wonder no one understands him. That makes sense that nobody understands him, because if he's wrapped in ecstasy, no longer quite masters of his own region or consciousness, pouring forth their glowing spiritual emotions in strange utterances, rugged, dark, disconnected, quite unfitted to instruct or influence the minds of others. He doesn't speak to men, but he speaks to God, for no one understands him. No one perceives the sense of what he's saying. They can't perceive it. However, in the spirit, he speaks mysterion, hidden or secret things not obvious to the understanding. Now that makes sense that no one understands him, because he's wrapped in ecstasy, no longer quite masters of his own reason or consciousness, pouring forth glowing spiritual emotions in strange utterances. Now, I want to stop here and talk about this strange utterances. Strange utterances is not some of the stuff that we've heard, just blah, 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 right? But someone with the gift of tongues can tell the difference between a false or fake tongue and an actual tongue. But because we have had, people who just push tongues and want to make people speak in tongues, we have a lot of chaos and confusion around this gift, and it's not actually doing what it's supposed to do for the individual. It's actually just people just trying to do something. And then, because I've heard testimony after testimony that people fake their tongue just so they get left alone, because people are trying to make them speak in tongues. You gotta just say Jesus, say Jesus, say Jesus, say Jesus till they speak in tongues. That's not speaking in tongues, because this is a gift from God. So you can't make somebody speak in tongues. You can't force somebody to speak in tongues.